Serious, people who have found a secret room or space in their house. How long did you live in the house before you found it, and what was in it? What was the eventual outcome of finding the room? Lived in a warehouse in Melbourne. Always thought it would be cool to get on the roof, but there was no access. After about 6 months, I'm standing in front of a mirror upstairs when I notice it has hinges. I push on it, it clicks and opens out, revealing a small attic and roof hatch. That was pretty cool. Used to sit up there and watch the sunset over the city. I found a secret space in my closet when my mom and I were moving out of the house she was renting to move into my stepdad's house. I never noticed it because junk covered the section of the wall that was covering a small entrance to a room that was sealed off with boards and plywood. I couldn't pry it open, but I could see light shining in it and a single mason jar filled with what I assumed was water. The air was cold in there, like as if the central heating didn't even reach that part. I showed it to my mom and she told me that she doesn't remember seeing that there when we had moved in 8 years prior, but since we were moving out, it didn't matter. The room gave me the creeps for whatever reason. I know why it was sealed off or why there was a single mason jar filled with water in the center of the room. Probably moonshine from Prohibition. My parents bought a house from an old family member to help her pay for nursing home care. She hadn't lived in the house for years at that point. She was a hoarder and we were tasked with cleaning up the house over the course of a summer in order to make it livable prior to the start of school. Rat carcasses fused to the carpet, old tax documents from the 60s, etc. Well, we were pulling up the linoleum tiling, covering the original hardwood floor, disappointingly enough, in a side room when I made the joke about the previous resident being a secret mass murderer and that there was a trapdoor under the linoleum full of dead bodies. I pulled up a huge section of tiling only to find a trapdoor underneath. Scared the crap out of me, but when we finally built up enough courage to open the damned thing, we discovered there was nothing under there. It was a walled off section of the basement with a dirt floor. We suspect it was an old root cellar from back when farmers had to store their crap in a cold, dark place to prevent it from spoiling. Linoleum is great. People who don't appreciate wood floors use it to preserve the wood for us. It wasn't a room, but after living in our house for a few years, we decided to remodel the basement bathroom. Tore out the old shower enclosure and found a window behind it. Said window was covered on the outside by an apron of siding that came from the cantilevered room upstairs all the way down to the concrete pad. We tore off the siding apron and let some light in. It was much better. We moved into a house with a door in the kitchen that could not be opened. The real estate tried but failed. Assumed it led to the laundry room but was walled off. My older siblings, like any typical teenagers, were not convinced of this and were determined to open it. It was just a normal pantry, but they never told our mother they managed to open it and used it to hide things from her like alcohol, smokes, and weed. I can't imagine buying a house and not opening every door in the place. The curiosity about the building I just bought would drive me onwards, even if I had to disassemble things to do it. Watched Home Alone and saw that attic that Macaulay Culkin was staying in and wondered if we had one in our townhouse. Ran around with a stepladder until I found it in my mom's closet. Got on my tiptoes on the stepladder and fought the door open. Ended up being a big piece of plywood and peered into the attic. A mouse colony stared back. It was like that scene in Ratatouille. Decades worth of fesses covered the whole space. My mom was not happy once I told her. We moved shortly after. When clearing out my grandma's house, I found a small door in the wall of the basement that led to a tiny room. According to my mother, that's where they hid the family heirlooms when thieving relatives came to town. I was mostly interested in the fact that it was covered in scribbles from my mom and her sisters growing up. Back in college, some friends and I rented an old mansion that had been built in the early 1920s from an elderly lady. The place was falling apart, but it was huge and rent was dirt cheap. About 2 years into living there, I went to the basement to do some laundry and momentarily lost my balance, reaching out to steady myself using one of the wall panels. It flexed more than I expected, and after some inspection I found that it was removable. Behind it was a small, mostly empty, very dirty concrete room about 100 square feet. I say mostly empty because right in the middle there was a hole the size of a well that had been previously bricked up. It must have been old because the bricks had eroded at some point and exposed some of the hole. Maybe a 2-foot diameter circle out of the full 5 feet. After calling my friends down to look at it, I got the courage to creep a little closer and peer down into it. There was another room roughly the same size but deep, maybe 15 feet down, and mostly dirt. We shined a flashlight down into it and I could swear there was a teddy bear at the bottom. Unfortunately, despite plenty bargaining, none of us were ever able to work up the courage, liquid or regular, to tie a rope and climb down for a closer look. Especially after we noticed that the bricks, which I thought had fallen and were all accounted for, scattered around the hole as if something had broken out. At the risk of my account being discovered by my Redditor friends, this was in Pittsburgh. We did a little research and think the sub-basement may have been related to Prohibition, but honestly I'm just willing to accept that explanation in order to avoid lifelong nightmares. My friends had a thing like this in their basement in Boston. They called it the hole and had weird hole themed parties. Helping my granddad move house, we accidentally found access to the underfloor area. Not even big enough to really call a crawl space, I don't think. Spotty memory. There was a small pile of trash from the 60s 70s. Juice cans, chocolate bar wrappers and crumpled newspapers, and bits of discarded construction debris and some broken tools. We think it must have been used by the builders in lieu of a trash can. It was cool, an accidental time capsule. That is kinda cool. It was about a year into owning our house. We actually found 2 secret rooms. One was just a room under the stairs that was closed off. Had some toys from the 70s in it. The really crazy one was when we redid the insulation in our attic. One of the workers asked if I knew there was a room up there. I had no idea. So we cut open the drywall and there were stacks on stacks of boxes from the 60s. Like a ton of boxes. And they were all full. So I opened them up expecting some cool stuff. And they were full of freaking pine cones. One of the bigger bummers of my life. When I was younger, my family would go and collect pine cones and store them in our attic. We would use them for kindling in the winter. Moved into an 18th century farmhouse as a little kid and found a small panel door in the back of the large closet in my small room. Turned out to be a small finished room over the eaves that had a small portal window. I spent hours in that room reading and hiding from the world. This sounds like a childhood dream come true. There was a hidden door behind the wallpaper. Obviously the doorknob was taken off, so it blends in with the wall, in the hallway. We lived in this house for 6 years and I found out about this door 2 years ago. When we opened it we saw a skeleton in the corner. Not gonna lie, that scared me shitless. Although it was just a prop left by the past owners of our house. Probably to scare the crap out of you when you found it as a joke. While installing Cat 5e network cables many years ago in my house, I discovered a short and squat, cast iron water heater, inside some walls, around a staircase and bathroom, connecting the basement and the next level of the house. I'm guessing whoever did the remodel didn't think the little bit of space that could be reclaimed was worth it. I found it when I realized my measurements weren't making sense and couldn't figure out why I wasn't seeing my Ethernet cable. I had to plot everything out carefully because of the split level nature of my house, the crawl space, the basement, etc. And figured out there was 3 feet of space unaccounted for. It will probably be removed when we remodel the basement bathroom. I figure I can either get more storage space or a full bathtub instead of just the shower stall that is there now. Growing up, my dad's hoarding was pretty bad and my childhood home was pretty old. Around my preteens I started trying to navigate through the clutter to parts of the house I truly had never seen because of all the junk. I found this door that had been blocked off and I eventually moved stuff around enough that I could open the door, which was hard because the room was big but he filled it so much the only way to navigate it was a single narrow path. Behind the door was trippy to me as a kid because the back couple of rooms of the house were rotted out and collapsed in places, so my parents just blocked it off, I guess. Going from my packed house to this completely empty collapsing ruins was actually really interesting to me. I used to try and navigate through it till one day I fell through the floor and landed underneath the house with my head a couple inches from a nail pointed up from the ground. I don't remember if I ever went back through the door after that. As the child of a borderline hoarder, I feel for you. There was a small door under some stairs, almost like Harry Potter's room, in my old apartment in Venezuela. We lived there for a year until I leaned on it and felt it wiggle a little and realized it was a small square door. I was too scared to open it, so had my dad do it, and about 20 or so cockroaches flooded out. Never have I felt so much panic. That sounds like it's straight out of my nightmares. Not quite a secret room or space, but when my parents were doing renovations on our childhood home, the home was roughly 100 years old at the time, they found an old safe, quite small, in the wall that had been left open with a bottle of either port or rum and a long faded note inside. The builder helping dad said it was common to find the odd bottle of alcohol in walls during renos on old homes, as there was a tradition for a while where one homeowner leaves a hidden bottle for the next to find during a time of construction renovations. We couldn't determine how old the bottle was as all the labeling had faded, but dad went and bought a new bottle of port and put it in the old safe with a laminated note before sealing it back up for the next owner to find. Not necessarily secret, but my old house was a duplex. There was a hobbit-sized door on the bottom floor and I glanced in there a few times but only saw pipes and different electrical units and stuff. There was some of the landlord's maybe past residents' junk in the corner. After a few years I explored behind it and realized it leads to the other half of the house. We bought a house that had been built in the 1880s, lived in it for 7 years and then had to have some wiring work done. The electrician was working down in the basement and wanted to drill through a brick wall to the outside for some reason I no longer remember. We give him the okay and go about our business. He starts drilling and then stops, comes upstairs and tells us he just found a bricked up room and what do we want to do about it? Well, we kind of still want our wiring situation taken care of, but if there's a body in some Amontadillo in there, I definitely want to know. On the other hand, I don't want to let my sister's boyfriend knock the wall down with a sledgehammer. As we are discussing this, the electrician offers to run a scope through the hole he just drilled so we can take a look without doing more damage, or, as he put it, destroying evidence. So our new friend gets his scope set up and we all go down to the basement and watch the monitor. It's a very small space, maybe 3 by 5 feet. Nothing in there but a really old, gross looking plushie. Not a teddy bear, maybe a dog. It was sewed out of some kind of patterned fabric in a vaguely dog-like shape. That's it, nothing else. Electrician asks us what we want to do. I ask Kate if he can seal the hole he just drilled because this is definitely how ghost movies start. He agreed and patched it up, drilled somewhere else, finished the rewiring and we all continued our lives. We moved out 2 years later and as far as I know, haunted doggy is still bricked up in the basement of that house. Found it moving in. Latch at bottom of corner of closet. Cape Cod style house. Crawl space to basically uncarpeted room with 2 windows over garage. Fell through one time. I found a stash of guns in a secret room underneath my staircase a week after moving in. I'm pretty sure the guy who bought my grandpa's hunting cabin. Luckily, he also wants it for hunting, so he should be licensed and such. We'll have similar stories. We found a gun over the mantle, tucked where it couldn't be seen, a few in the crawl space, one on a rafter, one under the bed. I'd bet money that wasn't all of them. In my house there was an upstairs bedroom that was made into a game room for me and my sister. When we were about 12 years old we realized that a section of the paneling came off and there was a small closet-sized room behind it. We kept it a secret so that when friends came over we would have the ultimate hiding spot for hide and seek. A few years later we were talking to our parents about what we found and they said that the house was built during the Prohibition era, so they most likely used it as a place to hide alcohol. I lived in the house of my grandma for a few years. Secret room beneath a trapdoor on the 2nd floor, which was basically a void between walls on the complicated 1st floor, was used to hide Jewish families during World War II. We couldn't find the access to the crawl space during the first inspection. We didn't want to buy the house till we saw every inch, especially vibratio foundation. Turns out one of the closets had such a perfect carpet job you can't tell the floor is a carpeted door. You have to pull the carpet to lift it. Nothing interesting but a small crack. I bought a house back in 2010. There was a wooden box next to an old oak tree in my backyard. It had no doors and no way to look into it. The box was about as big as a love seat and it looked as old as the house. About 30 years but very well kept. No bug damage. I waited for about 2 years until I got the nerve to open it. It was empty. My old house had this weirdly large concrete slab in the corner of the yard that was covered by a ton of leaves when we moved in. I thought it was maybe foundation for a shed, but it was in a very odd location. Years later when I was getting ready to move, it bugged me that I didn't know what it was for. I got a friend to help me come dig around it, expecting to confirm that it was just an old foundation. We dug for days in the middle of August. We had to start digging at night to protect ourselves from the heat. We got about 15 feet down and the concrete wasn't showing any signs of ending. We eventually struck a pipe with a nozzle and discovered that there was more concrete moving towards the center of the yard. About a week later my dad came home and almost had a stroke when he saw that we were digging up half the yard. We had sold the house and were expected to leave by September 1st. He made us fill it all in and I left home never finding out what it was. Some of my teachers who were longtime town residents told me that my neighborhood had been farmland before development and that there may have been several bomb or fallout shelters in that area. I would have loved to have found an entrance into the bunker, if that's what it was. I just googled concrete septic tank, and it definitely seems like you were trying to get into an old tank of crap. My parents found one when I was a kid. My dad was remodeling our lower level when he noticed that part of the closet wall sounded hollow and realized there must be something behind it. He had to cut away the wood paneling to get to it. Inside, we found it must have been a little clubhouse that some previous owners made for their kids or grandkids a long time ago. There were 4 pegs on the wall. Each one had a boy's name written underneath it. We think they used them as coat hooks. It was the mid-2000s when we found it, so my parents got my sisters and I some motion activated lights to stick on the walls, and gave us some old cushions so we could use it as a clubhouse too. Good times. Not my house but my elementary school, small one, countryside. In 1990, after some pay hours, a friend of mine and I were horsing around downstairs in the basement outside the locker rooms. In the process we tackled each other with shoulder pushes and my friend flew into a panel at some point, where a screw popped out of panel that revealed overpainted screws that revealed a panel door. The janitor thought it was just the ducts for air or water pipe maintenance under the school. When we told him about the door and asked and said he came to the school in 1971 but never had been in there, of course, the two of us being 6th graders, had to go on a hunt and later returned with a screwdriver after school hours. School was not locked due to after school club same place, and entered with a flashlight. It was a secret basement of ducts at first. Super dusty and metal stamps revealed at least something in the corridors were built in 1959. The school was built in the 1950s, but the fun part was when the 1x1 meters ducts suddenly ended out in a slightly larger room, 2 meters tall and probably 5x2 meters in total. Had old equipment, like tables and stuff with military emblems on it, and we thought of course it could have been an old Nazi HQ or so, not adding 2 and 2 together that the school was built later than 1945. But it was an old nuclear shelter thing that later was revealed to be a cancelled part of the school, like planned and built, but never executed properly due to budgets, and the ducts had been the old ducts for maintenance of water and sewage pipes. So exciting, but in the end, just a budget cut nuclear shelter with closets, blankets, tables and a little kitchenware of military origin. But holy crap, did it feel like Indiana Jones at some point. It wasn't our house, but a secret room in our barn. When we moved to the property, the barn was full of all kinds of stuff, so it took 5 years-ish to find it. We were kids building a fort, moved some old wooden picking boxes and found a little door. There were a bunch of Christmas decorations from the 70s, including a cutout of Santa, so when we saw his head, we thought we found a body. Never said we were smart kids lol. Once we realized it was just decorations, we crawled in to explore and fell through the floor to the rooms below. Good times when my dad found the collapsed ceiling in the wood shop. Oops. It was secret from me but not my parents. You know how some houses have beds and drawers? We had a drawer like that but didn't use it, and the empty drawer could also be accessed through a hole in the adjacent closet. I think I found it around age 8. So about 6 years after moving in, when playing hide and seek and crawling deeper into that closet than I ever had previously. I spent a lot of time in there after that as my secret clubhouse. Eventually the whole room was remodeled and that drawer as well as a second staircase were removed. Apparently that room used to be a servant's quarters when it was first built, which explains the stairs from a bedroom to the kitchen. And maybe someone with only one room to themselves would want the space saving of a drawer bed, but my parents had no use for it because we didn't have a live-in servant. Saw the room when we were looking at the house but couldn't get up there for a while. In the bedroom there's a door up in the corner along with like a 2 or 3 foot loft. Once we finally got a ladder and we're able to go up there, we found a lot of carpets. Not like replacement carpets for the stuff on the ground currently, but like decorative carpets from the previous owner. It was also pretty nice given it is basically just an attic, but there was a light with a separate light switch, rather than like a string you pull. And for some reason there are probably like 15 outlets up there. No idea what the builder previous owner was thinking, but it is what it is. I sometimes go up there just to see what it's like. You have been visited by the happy baby pygmy murder cow. Back away slowly and subscribe quickly to ensure your safety. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.